Hello, Empowered Warriors. Welcome to episode 23. So if you are a person who identifies as being stuck in life, maybe your business is not where it wants to be, perhaps you're not in the relationship that you want, and you just feel paralyzed, like you dream of being free, then this is the episode for you. I feel like I say this every single week, but it's a really important episode for those of you out there that are feeling stuck, and you may have been feeling like this for a very, very long time. You know, freedom is often, especially if you're a solopreneur, you work for yourself, freedom is a value that is often very, very important to entrepreneurs. And I know I have a lot of entrepreneurs who listen, so if you identify with things that I've said and freedom is very important to you, and freedom in particular in relation to income and wealth and prosperity, then this is the episode for you, and you don't want to miss it. You do want to listen to it in its entirety, so stay tuned. Welcome to the Empowered Warrior Podcast. My name is Angela Noel, and I am an intuitive coach, acupuncturist, and Chinese herbalist. This podcast is all about empowerment, meaning how you can maintain your personal power in order to have the best life beyond your imagination. An empowered warrior is someone who has the identity of a person who is healthy, radiant, and free from all suffering, and has the tools ready and available to move through life's obstacles with confidence, ease, and a sense of freedom. In this podcast, I bring over 16 years experience in Chinese medicine, countless years of self-development, and a passion for helping others find their personal power. I will be discussing just a few of my favorite topics regarding health from a Chinese medicine perspective, brain habits, and spirituality, so that you can quickly pave your pathway to freedom and be free from the chains that have kept you stuck. My intention with this podcast is to serve as a guide for warriors who want to form a healthy foundation of body, mind, and spirit, and sustain it by changing who they are being from the inside and having a stronger connection to their higher selves. My goal is to help students end the unnecessary suffering that they place on themselves by having poor health habits, negative thought loops, and a lack of self-worth. I'm so happy that you're here. Hello, Empowered Warriors. How are you? First of all, before we start the episode today, I have a very humble request. If you've been listening to this episode, whether it's been for months or you just started, I would love if you could kindly leave this podcast a review on iTunes. And the reason why is because reviews, if you have a podcast, I read one time, there's hundreds, literally hundreds and thousands of podcasts out there. And in order for a podcast to become known, and in my case, my goal is to get this podcast out there into more ears so that the ripple effect can start happening with raising the consciousness and helping humanity grow and evolve as much as possible. And that is my intention with the work that I do. Clear and simple. That is my intention with the work that I do. And with the gift that is the internet, podcasting has the ability to reach people all over the world. And that is my goal, is to reach people all over the world. So if you found value in, even if it was a small nugget that really helped you in some way, shape, or form, I would be so grateful if you could leave a review on iTunes or Spotify or wherever podcasts are, because I realize not everybody has iTunes. And if you do that, if you take a screenshot of the episode you're listening to, in this case, this one, or whatever episode, take a screenshot of that episode, post it on Instagram, and tag me at I am Angela Noel on Instagram. And then I'll reach out to you and I will send you $10. And it's just so important, this mission, to get the Empowered Warrior out into as many ears as possible. It has nothing to do with me. I honestly have zero attachment to any outcome. I know that I love podcasting. This is kind of my jam. So it is a labor of love. It's something that I'm going to do whether I have 10 reviews or 10,000 reviews. But for me, it's all about impact. And if you're a person who has been noticing the importance of why it's important to evolve, why it's important to raise consciousness, why it's important to become healthy, why it's important to make more money, right? There's this new movement, as you've probably already know, if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, that wealth is going to help us become better people because it is a tool to help us help other people. I grew up in the 70s and the 80s where I was under the impression that money was evil and rich people were greedy. But let's face it, without money, without that form of exchange, money is just energy, right? Money really isn't anything except it's an extension of us. It's an extension of our identity. And money reflects our subconscious values. So I don't want to get too tangential because I'd like to really get into the content today. However, if you enjoy this podcast, I humbly ask you to leave a review. And if you follow all the steps that I mentioned with tagging me on Instagram, I will Venmo you $10 if you do that. All right, let's get into the episode. So today, I have to say, you probably already are aware that I get divinely guided to do my episodes. I stopped using scripts like a couple of months ago, and I just come on here. And not only is it more enjoyable, it's more fun. I feel that what is supposed to come through me and out to you is what's supposed to come out, as opposed to preparing and scripting and all that other stuff. So oftentimes, what ends up happening is I'll have an idea for an episode, and then by the time I sit down and do the episode, it might be a couple hours or a couple days or weeks later, my whole agenda for what I'm going to say in the episode has changed. The topic often changes. But this one keeps coming through, this subject matter, and I believe it's probably going to be one of the most important topics that I talk about on this podcast to date. And that is the topic of freedom. Now, if you're an entrepreneur, a solopreneur, a solo practitioner, and even if you aren't one of those professions or you don't identify as an entrepreneur, chances are if you listen to this podcast, you have caught a glimpse of the value that is freedom. And perhaps it is something that you also truly value. For me, freedom is my number one value, hands down. It is my number one value. And what I've realized as a result of having freedom as my top value, it's becoming more and more apparent that talking about what exactly freedom is and how it shows up in our life is becoming more and more important. So I'd like to just share a personal story with you. Back in 2016, I'm pretty sure it was 2016, maybe longer, at least 4 years ago, I still had my iPhone 6S. which in my opinion is probably the best iPhone ever. I still have it. I use it as like my, backup camera phone, backup phone for work, for social media. But anyway, I digress. So back in 2016, I changed my iPhone wallpaper to a picture of Andy Dufresne in The Shawshank Redemption. Now, Shawshank Redemption is probably in my top 3 favorite movies. And if you've never seen it before, I highly encourage you to watch it. It is, if you want to talk about the journey of somebody who has been wrongfully accused and how they resourcefully navigated their way through prison. And I can't remember how many years he was there, but it was an insane amount, 20 to 30, something like that. He was an older gentleman when he got out of prison. But the final scene of Shawshank Redemption shows Andy Dufresne, the main character, the wrongfully accused, escaping from prison. And I don't want to give too much of it away. So we'll just leave it at that if you're going to go and watch it. But he got out of prison and it's raining out and he's out of prison and he puts his arms in the air and the camera, the way they did the lighting in the camera, it just looks like lightning shining on Andy Dufresne's face. And you see this look of freedom. I had a very visceral response to watching this scene because in my interpretation, I think if you're a human being, there is this inner knowing and this inner desire to have freedom, whether it's your top value or it's further on down the list. But I do believe that for many of us, it is important to feel free. So I put this screenshot or screensaver on my iPhone. It's still on there on my old phone of Andy Dufresne, full wingspan, arms out, looking up at the sky in gratitude, saying that he's free. He's free. And at the time, I put that on my screenshot. Sorry, I keep saying that. I put that on my phone as a screensaver because I was going through a very challenging time in my life. I want to say it was even older than 2016. I want to say it was 2014, 2015. I was going through a very challenging time in my life. And someday I will talk about it openly and candidly. But let's just say that all I really wanted in my life at that time was to be free. To be free from my life's circumstances. And maybe 1 or 2 years in, after having that screensaver on my phone, I started to realize I was really committed to doing a lot of inner work. I probably had probably anywhere between 5 to 7 self-care appointments per week, which included my therapist, my chiropractor, my acupuncturist. Yes, I have an acupuncturist. I don't know. And then whatever, massage, Reiki, craniosacral, etc., etc. And what I really wanted, what was most important to me, was that I become free. What I didn't realize, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, I feel like I'm just getting warmed up here. After having that on my phone for a couple of years, I realized it wasn't a matter of being free from my circumstances, but it was a matter of me becoming free from myself. And I'd like to dig into that a little bit today because so many times we get caught up as human beings in the rabbit hole of feeling like we don't have a choice. That circumstances happen to us and there's nothing that we can do about it. I grew up believing that, and it was part of my story until I was probably, until about 4 years ago, when I started to realize it was me, myself and I that I needed to free myself from. So what does that mean exactly? And let me start, first of all, by asking you this, warriors. What does it mean specifically to be free from yourself? And I invite you right now to go within and journal about this if you are in a place where you can journal or come back to this question. If you're somebody who values freedom and you feel like you're not free, if you're feeling stuck, if you feel like you're constantly staring at the big mountain, if you're feeling like your business is not growing, if you feel like you're just leveling off in your business, like it's there, you haven't seen any growth, or maybe you're having a small amount of growth every year, but it's not the growth that you want, or if you're not making the impact that you want, what is causing you to feel stuck, to feel like you don't have any freedom? Is it a circumstance? For example, when I had my acupuncture business, I had a goal of seeing so many patients per week. And it wasn't until I was in a situation where I had multiple rooms where I was able to get close to that number, where I really felt like I was serving the amount of people that I wanted to every week. However, even though it was a fairly successful practice, I was busy. I had a good patient flow. I had people that came every single week and were dedicated to their wellness journey. I never really felt like I was growing. I felt like I plateaued and didn't go any further. And when I look back now, I realize where my mind was, where my brain set was back then. And I'm just going to rattle off a few things. I used to get really frustrated if people canceled at the last minute. I used to worry if I looked at my schedule and I didn't see a certain number per day. I used to get really caught up in the numbers and the worry and the concern about how many people were coming in. I used to get really impatient with patients that maybe were not my ideal clients. Oh, and also, let me just add one more thing before I go further. I had been getting hints for many, many, many years that I needed to close my Boston office and find an office that was close to home, and or close the practice altogether and do something else, be an online entrepreneur. I think I've talked about in other episodes, like I had been getting intuitive nudges to change my current circumstances, and I ignored it. Okay, so let's go back to the fact that I would get, and I probably won't go through every single example because it's the same underlying belief, the same energy behind it. So one thing that used to drive me freaking nuts is when people canceled at the last minute. You know those people. I have a lot of solo practitioners, a lot of healers who listen. You know those people, they would book and then they would text at the last minute saying, "Oh, sorry, I can't make it." And I used to give my power away to that frustration where it had absolutely nothing to do with me. The fact that the patient was canceling had nothing to do with me and everything to do with them. Furthermore, the energy that I was putting into that system that was my business was that of scarcity mindedness, was that of fear, right? When somebody canceled, in my interpretation, it meant, okay, I'm losing a patient or I'm losing income. Side note, I struggled with charging last minute cancellation fees, right? So sometimes I charged and other times I didn't. So yes, it was a loss. And I was like it was coming at myself from two different places, right? I was getting beaten up in two different ways by myself. because I was giving my power away to the frustration, and I wasn't charging the last minute cancellation fee. And I didn't hold that boundary with them. So there's a lot going on here. There's a lot to unpack with the way that I used to run my business. And I don't want to make this episode about me, but I know that there's people out there, there's warriors out there who can relate to this. So that's why I'm talking about it. So I ran my business from a state of disempowerment, from a state of I'm never going to get ahead because these people cancel on me, from a state of victim mentality, from a state of a brain set that is not necessarily, again, going back to some of the discussions I had about brain set, right, and brain habits. I was working from an identity of the past. I was working from my point A person. And that person was, okay, a past situation. And you might want to listen to this a few times, right? A past situation tells me that because this thing is happening in my business, whether they're canceling or they're not paying or I'm not getting the numbers, whatever. I was working from that point A identity of lack, victimhood, fear, worry, frustration, and not from the identity of who I wanted to be, who I need to be in order to grow my business exponentially. Does that make sense? I want to make sure everybody understands that. So, getting back to freedom, if you're a person who does not feel free and feels stuck all the time, chances are there is something within your identity that is causing that. There is something in your brain habits that is causing that. If you go to your bank account and you see the numbers and all you see are low numbers or negative numbers or debt, this is an opportunity to check in with yourself and consider, who am I being to have these numbers in my bank account? Because let's face it, warriors, I just did a podcast interview on another podcast today where we talked about prosperity consciousness and we talked about money as being a representation or an extension of ourselves. So going back to freedom, because we're talking about freedom and being stuck and not having what we want, it's all related, is it not? Are we all on the same page? It's all related. If you're not feeling free in your life, if you're not feeling free in your business, if you feel like you have to stay home and work. Now I know this we're talking about different times now, so some of us are not even going into our offices. But if you're feeling trapped, perhaps because this is the time of the pandemic and maybe you're certainly not making the income that you were making before or had wanted to make by this time of this year, what is causing you to not be getting ahead? What is causing you this lack of freedom? What is causing you this feeling that you need to stay home and work instead of going on that vacation that you deserve? What is causing you to make decisions based on not being able to afford it? What is causing you to feel stuck all the time? What is causing you to have low prosperity consciousness? What is causing you to binge eat and emotionally eat at night because you feel like you're not getting what you want out of life? Maybe it's a stressful situation with your business, or you're fighting with your partner, aging parents. But what is causing you to feel trapped by your circumstances and as a result not have the freedom in your life that you want? Because chances are, if you were listening to me, as I mentioned before, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but if you are listening to me right now, and you are an entrepreneur, solopreneur, or you're just a person that wants to have the life that they want, and you don't have it right now, I really invite you to consider and discover what that underlying belief or set of beliefs or set of stories that have probably been around since you were a very young child, where are you going to be if you continue to blame your circumstances for not having what you want? Where are you going to be in a year from now? And as you probably have realized by now, time is flying by. And it's not a matter of not having enough time. Warriors, it's not a matter of not having the money to have the freedom that you want, but it is a matter of how committed you are, of how trusting you are in yourselves to grow your business, to have prosperity. Because let me tell you, when you look at money as energy, which it is, it's infinite. I had a conversation with one of my best friends about a year ago. We had met, we went to a conference together, and we had flown out there and we met there. And she's like, when I was in the airplane and I was looking down from the airplane down below, and I was observing all the abundance there is. And that's just on this planet alone. And I'm going to get a little woo on you, but we are not only human beings. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And we are cosmically connected to those energies of the universe, which is infinite. So when she was on the airplane looking down and looking at all the mountains and trees and leaves and, all the you can't really see wildlife from an airplane, but she was referring more to the trees and what she could see from the airplane, the rocks and the landscape. It was just infinite. There was so much beauty. She's like, why is it that I'm stuck in lack mentality when there's so much abundance out there? And I laughed because my mind went right away to my yard. We have like an acre of land. And every year, my husband and I have to go out and we have to pull the sassafras, or we have to pull, not because sassafras isn't beautiful. Trust me, I think it's one of the most amazing trees and has an amazing smell. But sassafras will take over everything if you allow it. Or just the many abundant plants that grow on my property that just will take over. Bittersweet, right? For those of you who are into the outdoor landscape like me, bittersweet. Porcelain berry, I think it's called, that vine that just takes over, right? So what causes us as humans to feel like there isn't enough when we have evidence? We see evidence every day of the abundance and the vastness. For those of you that might be arguing with me or rolling your eyes and you're still listening and you're like, but, Angela, times are tough and, I really don't have that kind of money. I really don't. If you were able to listen to this podcast, chances are you have a phone. You have internet, but you at least have a phone or you have some kind of device to listen to this, unless you're listening to it in the library, which means you have access to a library, which means you have access to the internet and you have access to information. And with what I said before about money being a reflection of your inner self, of who you are from the inside, you have the ability to change that by changing your identity. And how can you do that? How can I change my subconscious identity? How can I change my values? Well, I'm going to give you 3 steps And then I'm going to end this episode because I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a shorter episode this week. Because I realize I've been going for like an hour lately. So I appreciate you all listening and tuning in. So how can I change my subconscious values and change who I am from the inside out? The first thing to do is simply to create awareness of your thoughts. That means you are just kind of, if you can identify or if you can imagine yourself as like split in half, you're two people. And one's the observer and one's the doer. You as the observer are constantly keeping an eye on your thoughts and the language you speak. So if you're somebody that says, I'm not creative, or I'm always broke, here's an opportunity to reframe that. Tell a new story. And secondly, watch your thoughts. Just continue to watch your thoughts and practice. So awareness, watching your thoughts is kind of all the same thing, but you're just constantly keeping tabs on your thoughts. And for those of you that say you can't do it, I want to remind you that that is a story. And what do you have to gain by saying you can't? What is your secondary gain? Oftentimes it's comfort by saying you can't do something. Or you want to stay comfortable, or you're oftentimes, unfortunately, many people just don't want to. They're afraid. So what is that secondary gain to saying that you can't all the time? The next thing I recommend is keep a journal. Really simple, right? Again, if you're saying I can't, what's causing you to say that? What is the underlying belief behind saying you can't? You know, the successful people that I know and the successful people that I work with are committed to being aware of their thoughts and being aware of the words that they speak. I was speaking to a friend today who was telling me that they do not use the word expensive. It's too expensive. They don't use that word at all in front of their kids, ever. Because they really want to enact a sense of abundance and prosperity consciousness in their children. So second is journaling. And third is, if you need help, hire a professional. And again, if you're somebody that's saying, I can't, or I don't have the money, then who are you being in order to be that person who's saying that you can't afford it and don't have the money? Right? Our outer world, meaning our money, our bank account, our business, the people we spend time with, the conversations that we have, the ways that we spend our time, our life circumstances are a direct reflection of our inner world. So if you're unsure how to reprogram your subconscious beliefs and you're feeling stuck, trapped, like you don't have freedom, and you feel like you're always going to be like this, and it's really stressing you out, and the pandemic is getting worse and worse, or it's election year, whatever your stories are, you have the ability to change your story. I have to tell you that 2020 has been the best year of my life, and I am not ashamed to admit that. The reason is because of this work that I've been doing, and as I mentioned earlier, I probably started doing this work, real, like deep inner work, in 2012, 2013. So, 7 to 8 years now. And only recently have I really gotten into the identity, subconscious beliefs, changing who I am being. And that is how I help people. So again, if you're listening to me saying, how can you say that? How can you say 2020 was your best year, Angela? And whatever judgments that are coming up from that, because I know I trigger people sometimes. It's okay. When we're triggered, that as the opportunity for learning and growing, warriors. So for those of you out there that are like, yeah, no, 2020 was the worst year. Okay. What causes you to say that? And where else in your life are you allowing your external circumstances or the state of the world to control the life that you are leading? Because I guarantee if you don't have the business that you want and you are coming up against me in this podcast today or getting triggered, you're looking at the reason right there, because it lies within yourself. So warriors, I'm so grateful. I know I dropped a lot of bombs today with you, but I felt it was really, really important for you to hear this message. I know that this is going to help you, and that's why I do the work that I do. And if you found value in this episode or any episode, tell a friend to tune in. If you're driving into work and you're listening to podcasts, tune into The Empowered Warrior. Tell your friends, tell your family, and I am so grateful for all of you, because I know that as a result of getting this kind of message out there, the ripple effect already has started and will continue. And that's why I'm here. That's my mission in life. So thank you so much. I'm grateful for you, and I love you all so much. Until next time, take care. Thank you so much for listening to the Empowered Warrior podcast. It is an honor and a privilege to have you as a listener. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast and would like to help others pave their pathway to freedom, end their disempowerment and suffering, and become an empowered warrior, please share this podcast with your friends and family. Also, it is my intention to help humanity grow and evolve to their highest potential. So if you really enjoy what you're hearing, please help me spread the word by leaving a review in iTunes. Thank you again, and I am so grateful to be able to serve you in this very exciting way.